So the tier one assessment. Now, you are well aware of this stage gate model, I assume, that we start from the product idea and go all the way to the pilot scale through the lab scale. Now, while doing so, we also have this issue with the data availability. Yeah? So, for example, at the product idea stage, we start with very less data or almost no data available. All we have is just an idea in our mind, and then we go towards higher stages of innovation. We continue developing or generating new data, and somewhere around the pilot scale, we have data abundant situation. So that's a general idea. Sometimes it can change from incremental innovation to radical innovation, and from company to company, their scope, their portfolio of products, etc. And depending on the data availability, we have the different tools which we can use. So at product idea screening, we would like to use such tools which are not data intensive, which ask for minimal data and provide you a sort of red flags that you need to be aware of. Thanks, Soma. So that's where this tier one assessment focuses on. For lab scale and pilot scale, we use more data intensive tools. And that's where another task within work package 2 about the inventory of the tools and methods is being developed. And that will also be shared with you in the coming time. But for the moment, let's focus on this tier one assessment, what we did, and present you some ideas. Next, please. Now, before I show you the content of this tier one assessment, I would like to tell that this is not uh, only effort that has been undertaken so far as the sustainable safety and sustainability by design evaluation is considered. There are many initiatives that have been launched in the recent history, and though to name a few, there are certain like PSA, so from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. BASF has got its own triple S system, Licara Innovation Scan, that was developed in-house at TNO. Then we have social life metrics, also from WCST, JRC technical report on the SSBD, harmless, Cephic's own. Then there was a previous project Surpass, OECD's guide, as well as the UN's Sustainable Development Goals list. So what we have done is that we wanted to develop a system which is in harmony with different initiatives taken so far. So meaning that the issues or the aspects that have been considered critical by these initiatives, we do not miss out on them, and also further improve on them, because not necessarily all of these initiatives proposed their evaluation system on a tier one, but rather on a more higher tier assessment. So we wanted to also build upon that so that it's easy to use and fast to use at tier one. Next, please. So here is the tier one assessment. So first we start with Thoma. Am I at liberty to tell about the questions, to go into the details?
Please go ahead. Yes.
Okay, all right, okay. So this tier one assessment is basically in three parts. The first part is about identifying the strong negatives or the negatives, meaning they are sort of a showstoppers, let's call them. Meaning, if you have a strong negative or a negative, then there is a serious issue with the innovation that you're working on, and you need to rethink about it before going ahead. So first of all, the first question is about the use of any non-sustainable renewable raw materials or critical raw materials. So as you can understand that this is quite a critical aspect that one needs to be aware of. So if there is any use, so the green arrow means yes, and the red arrow means no here. And if there is a black arrow that will come later on, that means you need to go forward. That's the key over here. So if there is such a use, then of course it's a strong negative and you need to think about it. And as per the PSA, the Portfolio Sustainability Assessment Methodology, we are also calling it through a score when we call it C minus minus here. Then we go ahead. If there is no such issue, then we go for the CLP limit. So the CLP limit, which is about 0.1% weight by weight in a final product. If there also if there is an issue with it, then there will be some in compliance issue with the at least with the REACH regulation, and therefore there will be a problem later on in the future. So one needs to be aware of that. Then we go ahead and check for upcoming regulations, whether the presence of mainly with the substance of concern is there, or restriction as per the restriction roadmap if something is prohibited, etc., etc. But this is more of an anticipation, and therefore it does not call for the strong negative, but rather negative. Still something to think about, but on a lower note than the strong negative. And then the next question would be the comparison with the benchmark, where we look at the deterioration of the basic rights and needs of the worker, consumer, etc. So all the stakeholders, whether there is any negative impact on the stakeholders. So for example, you are mining certain resource from certain country, and there you have some forced labor or slavery happening, something like that. So that's also a strict FOPA, something like that. So this is just one example. All this calls for strong negatives or negative. But if you ensure that there is no such thing, then we categorize the innovation as no issue, and therefore it goes for the second phase. Next, please. So let's assume that you answered no to all these questions and you arrive what we call as no issue. And then we start looking at whether it's a neutral or is it really positive. So you have ruled out the negatives. Now the question is whether it is as good as your benchmark, or is it even better than your benchmark? Now that's the stage. So compared to the benchmark, is there any positive impact on any of the eight sustainable categories? Now, I don't have all sustainable categories, eight sustainable categories on my mind, but they are something in line with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals and other initiatives that I showed you. So, for instance, biodiversity or impact on the circular economy or the climate change, etc., etc. So, in this question, what we are trying to see is that whether you are improving any of the eight sustainable category. If the answer is no, then it's a neutral. It is as good as your benchmark. But if it is answer is yes, then you move towards the next question. We also want to see whether there is a negative impact. You should not be improving one sustainability category at the cost of the another. And if the answer is yes, that there is a negative impact, then it goes back to being neutral. But if the answer is no, then you start to look at two different questions. One is that it does it help in creating new jobs, development of new skills, so societal impacts basically, and also the fair competition, good supplier relationships, etc. If the answer to these two questions, at least one is yes, then you have then you have a A plus plus. But if the answer to both questions is a no, then you have A plus. So that's the categorization of the innovation in these scales. Any question on this part?
No.
All right. Let's move to the next slide then. All right, now points of attention, as I mentioned already. So there are certain questions that we devised which do not put the innovation in any scale, but rather make the innovator aware that there are certain issues that you need to tackle along the innovation value chain. We call them not showstoppers, but then as I discovered just now, 5 minutes ago, that the other ones are also not showstoppers. So please ignore this point. Uh, so as I said, the main purpose of these points of attention is to make innovators aware of the potential SSBD issues. And the points of attention, the main purpose of this point of attention is to trigger a higher tier assessment to make the to resolve the issues raised by these points of attention. Now, the resolution of these issues can be either by making the knowledge more certain. So there might be some unknowns that one need to be aware of, and then through higher tier assessment, we make these unknowns to knowns, or we need certain more assessments like some in vitro methods to make certain no to yes through some substitution. Next, please. So this is the first part. So here there are many questions. So, but more or less, idea is that we would like to see whether there is any use of the environmentally or the human hazardous substance along at any life cycle stage. If the answer is yes to this question, then we see whether there is a probability of exposure, possibility of exposure here. So a risk-based approach. If the answer to the certain both of these questions is yes, then there is a point of attention or a red flag raised. So this is shown as an exclamation mark. And each exclamation mark is accompanied by a certain point of attention. So in this case, the first point of attention will be that the potential human and or environmental exposure to hazardous substances used or released throughout the product life cycle. So the innovator needs to be aware of this and devise certain methodology to tackle it. The second question, point of attention will be at any life cycle stage, is your material product in powder form? So what we have seen is that if you are working with the powders or highly volatile liquids, then the likeliness of the exposure is there is likeliness of the exposure, and therefore the human exposure is likely there. So this is something that one needs to be aware of. Uh, Question also about the multi-component nature. There's a question about the substantial material breakdown along the life cycle. Then possibility of indirect contact with worker or consumer skin, so dermal exposure there. You have oral consumer exposure here. Also, there any exposure prevention measure at the workplace, etc. Now, one can think of ignoring it as well, depending on the situation, because it might be possible that certain questions look at that they are unnecessarily punishing a certain alternative, which might sound promising. So it depends from situation to situation, and it rests with the user, the final choice that they would like to take ahead, which points of attention along the innovation value chain. Next, please. The other questions are about more about the marketability. So not the exposure part, but the marketability, where we're talking about whether it is better or equal to the benchmark. Then we also talk about the expected purchase price per unit of the material, the capital, the capex and the opex of your new product or material, the probability of success, then the foreseen market potential, and lastly, if the production tonnage of the product. And depending on that, you have their corresponding points of attention. Any questions so far?
It's all good here.
All right, next then. Now, the implementation of this tier one assessment. Right now, it is an Excel stage, Excel format. This is the best we could come up with right now because of the limitation and the deadline for deliverable 2.1. The idea is that in the coming time, we will also work on an online tool. So a digital tool that will follow this decision scheme, consider the nuances, which are a bit difficult to consider within the Excel sheet. But right now, you must have received this Excel sheet. It was forwarded by Josephine. I think it was on Monday, but you should have it. So depending on the answers that you give for each alternative, so you are not supposed to read it because the text is too small, but the idea is that on the left-hand side, you have these questions that I just showed you. You give answers for each alternative that you are considering. And based on the answers, and mind you, these answers, they are not supposed to be quantitative. They are like yes, no, unknowns, better, equal, higher, etc., etc. And you can also give unknown, as simple as that. Based on the answers that you give, in the middle, you see this heat map. So in red, gray, and green. So for if there's a SSB positive SSBD impact based on your answer, then it will show as green, negative then red, and if there are unknowns in your answer, then it's a gray. And based on the answer that you give, you will also get the scores automatically as the third image here. And the result, basically, this is the result. For example, in alternative one, you get the result as a negative, alternative two as a strong negative. But for alternative three, you get a range. You can see a range that it starts from maybe negative to maybe strong positive. The idea is that although you have answered, let's say, like you have given the answer which gives you a score of negative in the starting, but you can also give it an unknown. Now, if you have answered unknown, then it will give you a range based on the final score that you'll end up on. So we also wanted to accommodate the uncertainty into our estimations. So, and then below you see in the red text the points of attention that I just talked about. So based on the answers that you are given, the points of attention will be automatically raised for each alternative. Right now it is shown only for alternative one, but alternative two, three, you can also have that. So that's more or less the tool right now.